Hi, I'm Lance Lambert. Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Vehicle Show. We are at the Shoreline Classic Car Show in Shoreline, Washington. This is an annual show. It is a very hot day here in Washington State. It's well into the 90s. Everybody's just melting today, but still, it's a great car show. There are about 300 cars here, everything you could think of, just odd things, beautiful things, muscle car things, everything. So you're going to get a chance to take a look at those cars, meet some of the owners of those cars, hear some great music. So kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. Stewart, I've been chasing you down for a couple of years trying to get an interview, and you always run off somewhere before I can get to you. Tell us about your beautiful 55 Buick.
Well, I bought it about going on 13 years ago from a judge up in Marysville. The car came out of Anchorage, Alaska, believe it or not, and it was in fair shape. I had to do a little work on it, but he sold it to his brother, gave it to his brother. He wanted to sell the car and do something for his mom. $3,000 bucks. That's how I got the car. Then 30,000 or so later, I'm still working on it. So
And you did a lot to it, or did it look a lot like this?
it looked like this, but I repainted it, new engine, new transmission, new rear end, new tires, new brakes, you name it. It's not a frame off, it's kind of a frame up restoration, but
It's got a little bit of a custom look with the wheels, but I know the Buicks had the wire wheels available.
the wire wheels on the Buick wouldn't handle radial tires. And so I ended up getting, these are what they call Cadillac aftermarket or Thunderbird or whatever. You just put the Buick logo on them. They're great wheels. I got them from Roadster Wire Wheel.
Which motor does it have in it?
It's got a 322 56 overboard, so it's about 340 cubes. It's got plenty of power, that 700R in it.
I've had two 57 Buicks, and yeah, they're a big, heavy car, but they scooted along just fine.
Yeah, well, they jacked the horsepower up to a 337 or something in 57, so.
Dynaflow?
700R4.
Okay.
That big, it's like doubling the horsepower because you got the 3 close ratios, then overdrive. I get 24 miles per gallon on the road. Unfortunately, around town, I never get into fourth gear, so I'm still at 10.
What are the custom crowd and lowrider crowd? What kind of reaction do you get from them?
When I got this, it was a lowrider. It was right on the ground with lake plugs, and I just couldn't deal with it, the way it rode and everything, so I just jacked it up, new springs, and replaced everything that needed to be replaced underneath. And
So when you see those people, is that the first thing they say is, when are you going to drop this 4 inches?
They're probably thinking that. They don't actually say that. 'Cause I was keeping the car bone stock until I put the new engine in and blew up the Dynaflow, and I decided I'm going to go with the 700R and just modernize it a little bit. I drove it to Colorado Springs 2 years ago, tried to get up Pikes Peak, vapor locked, and turned it around at 11,000 feet on that 2-lane road, and that was exciting.
The Tri-5 crowd, do they? I would think that they, though it's not a Chev, that they would just love this car.
They do, yeah.
Well, John, thank you very much. This is it's beyond pristine example. It's just absolutely perfect. So thanks for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show.
Thank you very much for the interview.
Steve Walker, you have a creation here that I see at all the car shows. I know you never see yourself coming down the street in something like this. It always draws a crowd. For some reason, there's always pinup girls all around it getting their pictures taken. What am I looking at?
Yeah, well, it's a 48 Diamond T. It's got a Chevy drivetrain, Ford independent rear suspension, custom frame, custom bodywork. Walter DeMarsh at the Market did the upholstery. And, actually, all I got left of the Diamond T is the grill and the headlights. But it's its own parade going down the street, and I really enjoy that. So
the design, it sort of looks like a submarine beluga whale, something that would pull airplanes around. How did you come up with the design?
Well, I like the streamliners from the 30s. My dad raced hydroplanes. I like that look too. And then a lot of it is just what parts I have available.
And you talk about the Chevy motor in it. What size?
A 250 straight six.
Oh, 6.
Yeah, straight 6. Well, the whole thing only weighs 3,000 pounds. It actually moves pretty good.
It looks like 5,000 pounds sitting there.
And then it has an air horn to amplify that effect. So,
what's the most bizarre reaction or comment you've gotten from somebody?
Well, let's see. I've had a guy tell me it was the only blue one he'd seen. I've had people tell me that their grandfather used to have one. And then I have a history I made up with it for Grand Prix truck racing, as though it occurred after the Second World War using troop transport roads with surplus war trucks. Diamond T was a surplus war truck. So I made up this fake history, and I'll have people come up and start telling me about their relatives who competed in it. And I think that's really wonderful.
Speaking of wonderful, it's really wonderful that did you step out of the mainstream when you created this? Is that kind of who you are, or do you have a string of the big three behind you that were like all of those, and you wanted to really do something different? How did this, how many beers or how many dreams did this start from?
I do a lot of sketches, illustrations, and I had a friend, Colin Case, who saw a watercolor I did of a fantasy car, and he said, let's build it. And so we started on it, and unfortunately he died before we completed it, so I put his name on the tail, Colin Case Racing. As far as the scale goes, I've built a lot of cars, and most of them are small. And it's a little alarming to go down the road in a small car close to the ground and not see people noticing you. This one they see. So.
Before this, you build another creation that was every bit as overwhelming as this one is. You've got this. What's out in the future?
Actually, I started building my own trophies because I've run out of garage space, and I just think I'd just jump right to the finish line and make up my own stuff.
I like you. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's very cool. Thank you for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show.
Well, thank you, Mr. Lambert.
All right. Steve, we said goodbye to you after the interview with your Diamond T, but then you pointed out that this was yours too, so we're back. You had one beautiful, bizarre, unusual vehicle. You have two. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this is a 1958 Alfa Romeo Triumph Ford Honda Harley Davidson with sidecar.
That's all.
That's all.
Yeah. What's the history on this?
I had a 58 Veloce in college. It was not in very good shape, and after I wrecked it, I saved the pieces, and about 12 years later, I decided to make this out of it. And custom frame, custom bodywork, custom upholstery, once again, by the shoemaker in the market. And then I added a sidecar to it so I could scare my kids, too. So.
You have kids, you must be the coolest dad in the neighborhood.
Well, they went through a phase when they were little when they wanted to be picked up in this, and then along about high school it was embarrassing, and then finally one of them got smart enough to ask me, Dad, is that really safe? So
No, but...
I was honest, it wasn't, but... Yeah.
Well, you talked about the reaction of people to the Diamond T, and people, oh yeah, I had one of those, or I didn't know they made them in blue, or what. Have you had the same kind of thing with this?
Yeah, people look at this and recognize it, and they'll start telling, oh yeah, I used to watch these race up at, where was that track, and that would have been a fun sport too, sprint cars with side hacks. But my concept was I'd watched races at the old Aurora Speedway when I was a kid in Seattle, and I'd watched sprint cars and midgets, and I really liked the shapes and the forms on them. I wanted to keep that, and I'd seen cars that would morph over the years. Drivers would keep adding on to something that was a 10 or 15-year-old car and keep it competitive. So my idea was that such a car had continued to morph until it turned into a street vehicle, and that's what I did here.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's Alfa Romeo running gear on it?
Yeah, Alfa Romeo drivetrain, engine, transmission, rear end, and gauges, and that way cool badge on the nose. At the time when I was working on this, to me, the Alfa Romeo engine was just a cheap Offenhauser. It was the same four-cylinder layout, twin overhead cam. After I cut it up and made this, I found out it was one of about 1,200 made. But now it's rarer, so I don't feel too bad about that.
So if you fall on hard times, you can put this thing at Barrett-Jackson, people find out what the motor is, and you're set for life.
Yeah, they'll buy it to strip the engine out of it, that's true.
Yeah, just what you want.
Yeah, I'd rather it stayed together. But.
You obviously have a tremendous imagination. If somebody is out there and wants to take the step of doing something wild and crazy like this, but they're afraid of, it'll be, people see too weird or too odd or whatever, what's your advice?
Yeah, well, go for it. I mean, what are you going to do? You can wait till you're 10 years older? No, try it now. It's less foolish to make those mistakes when you're young than when you're older, so go for it now.
All right. Well, I'm with you on that. The older I get, the crazier I get. So
Thank you, sir.
Maybe I'll have one of these in the future.
You should.
I know where there's one just like it. Yeah. Eric BROUGH, I've always liked 58 Chev Impalas. They are iconic car. The body was only around for 1 year. You have a pristine example. Tell us about it.
The car was built roughly 20 years ago by a builder named Tom Paul, and he built it for the gentleman that owned Mastercraft Chrome and Plating in Seattle. So he had the car built for him. So obviously the chrome was done by him. But so anyway, he had it for 3 years. He had the main contract with Kenworth Trucks. The contract dried up. He sold his entire car collection. My father bought the car, had about 500 miles on the restoration. He bought it from him. He had it for 17 years. And drove it quite a bit. He put 6,000 miles on it, but he would drive it down to Green Lake and take a nap in it. He was 83. He passed away 7 months ago. So I got the car now and drives like a dream.
58 was kind of the put on the chrome with a trowel year for General Motors, and Chevrolets were the least of that way. They're a little more subdued.
I look at it and just go, it's just chrome everywhere, but I have seen some of the other ones that are just all chromed out. But I think this was the most chrome that Chevy had ever put on a car up until, I believe, that it was the most chrome they ever put on a car. So.
Yeah, I think you're right. 58 Chevrolets, they had various motors in them. What does this have?
This is the 348 Tri-Power. There was a 280 horsepower. There was also a 315 horsepower. The builder, Tom Paul, claims that his a 315 horsepower. They only made, from what I could review, 1,000 of them. And some of them were put in police cruisers. Those cars were maybe destroyed or not around anymore. From what I've read is that there's very few 315s out there, and he says this is one of them. So I haven't actually got in the VIN number and verified that, but he built the car. He would probably know.
You mentioned off camera this is the first and last show for this?
This will be, it was never in a car show before. My father he would drive maybe to a car show with it and be off somewhere, and then he'd go look at the cars, but he didn't want to stay and sit in the hot sun and whatever, so he would take off. So he never had it in a car show, and I said I'm going to have it in one car show before I end up selling the car, which is, so this is the only one I wanted to show people the car, and that's it. So
Eric, thank you very much for being on the Vintage Vehicle Show. This is a really good example of a 58 Chevrolet Impala.
Well, thank you very much.
What a great time we've had here in Shoreline, Washington at the Shoreline Classic Car Show. A lot of great cars, a lot of great people. A huge thank you goes to Marty DeGrazzi. If it wasn't for him, there wouldn't be a show here. And he has a lot of help on this, a lot of sponsors that help put the show together. So a big thank you to them. And a big thank you to you. As I've told you before, if you aren't watching, we have no show. So thank you very much for watching the show, and I'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.